Asa Hutchinson is the former governor of Arkansas, now seeking the Republican nomination for the presidency in 2024. Governor, thank you for being with me.
It is good to be with you today.
So I suppose I do just want to start out. I did see that you commented earlier as it relates to Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds. Former President Trump has essentially criticized her for not coming out and endorsing her. She has, it seems as of right now, been providing a platform to all of the candidates. She attended the roast and ride put on by Iowa Senator Joni Ernst. I guess perhaps just comment on that and comment on your reasoning and some of your reactions that you might have to that.
Well, Governor Reynolds has been an ally of the First in the Nation caucus for Iowa. And she understands its importance here and the impact on the nation. And as governor, she made a commitment to be neutral. And so that makes sense to me. And for somebody to criticize her because she had a neutrality commitment is really heavy-handed and out of place. I respect that, as the other candidates should, and should work with it. And we should also realize that the endorsements is not going to swing the day in Iowa. It is one-on-one, working with the voters, telling about your experience and your vision for America, the optimism we have, and how we're going to solve the problem. So these are side issues, and Governor Reynolds should not be criticized for that, and she should have a lot of respect for the way she's conducted herself.
And, Governor, the field has grown quite significantly in terms of the number of people seeking the GOP nomination since the last time that you and I spoke. Now you have a lot of people that are running, one of which is former New Jersey Governor Christie. A lot of people on the opposite side of the political spectrum on the left have been praising him, it seems, for being, not as reluctant as some of the other candidates to come out and criticize someone like former President Trump. A lot of people have been comparing someone such as yourself to Governor Christie, making a lot of similarities between the two of you. What do you believe the place, though, for someone like yourself, someone like Christie, who haven't been as afraid to come out and criticize someone like Donald Trump? What type of a place will there be in the GOP if someone like Donald Trump is victorious in 2024 for either of you two?
Well, if Donald Trump wins the nomination and continues to lead our party, then we're not looking at a very bright future, first of all. It's hard to expand and gather independent voters in a general election, to get suburban voters, to expand with the young people whenever you have somebody who's constantly creating turmoil and narrowing the base and saying falsehoods out there. So it's not a very bright future for the GOP if Donald Trump leads it. And that's why I'm convinced that we need to have different leadership in the party and different leadership in our country, and that's why I'm running. And, it's a small consequence if I don't have a future of the party. I'm more concerned about the future of the country. And that's why I'm running for president. That's why my voice is important. That's why I'm getting on the debate stage. And I believe that the base of the party and the Republican voters are going to realize that if we're going to win, we've got to have different leadership. And that's what's proven true in 2020, and it'll be true in 2024. So that's what we're fighting for, the soul of the party, and there's a lot at stake this year.
And so far, it seems many observers have been pointing out that this is a fairly atypical primary as compared to something like, the 2016 either Democratic or Republican primaries, or the 2020 Democratic primary, for the reasoning of all of these candidates that are in the race, with the exception of a couple of folks such as yourself. It seems have been quite reluctant to come out and say anything too harshly against former President Trump, because they know they need to a certain degree, take some of his supporters and bring them over to their campaign. From your perspective, how can you still do that, given former President Trump is ahead in the polls right now? He has a lot of support. He's the front runner, as many people are saying. How can you take supporters from his campaign and bring them over to your campaign to make you successful?
Well, you cannot do that unless you showcase the differences between your leadership and Donald Trump and make the case that you would be a better nominee of the party. So whenever he's the front runner And whenever he is dominating the news, you got to take it on. You can't stand by weekly and say, we hope life gets better. You've got to make it better. And that's why I point out that Donald Trump gets it wrong, and he had, whether it's January 6th or whether it's his views on Ukraine, in which he wants to say he can end the war in 24 hours, and the only way you do that is to give up and to give Russia what they want. Whenever you look at his isolationist policies, whenever you look at his spending that he did in his first term, you take on those issues and say there's a better path for the Republican Party. But it's also just about the divisiveness that he has created. So you can't mix words. You've got to be straightforward about it. And that's what a candidate has to do when there's Trump with that kind of a lead. You can't sit back and say, I hope life gets better. You got to make it better.
And the Republican National Committee and Fox News is going to be hosting the first GOP debate in Wisconsin in August. They've released the requirements. In order to participate, you need 40,000 unique donors and at least 1% in the poll. Some of your fellow candidates, some of your opponents in this race have came out and said that they believe those requirements will limit participation in the debates. Are you confident, Governor, that you will be able to meet those requirements?
Well, I'm confident we can meet the requirements because we're having to focus the efforts on those donations and using every technique to get to 40,000. So we'll make it, but it's not the role of the RNC to dictate how candidates run their campaign. We've already made 1% in the national polls. We're moving up in that category, but to add the burden of creating 40,000 unique donors before the debate is obviously difficult for the candidates because they're using every kind of sales pitch and $1 advertisement in order to gain that kind of grassroots and small dollar donations. So it's burdensome, but we'll get there. And the debate's important. The voters are looking forward to it because that's the first time they'll be able to contrast the candidates between themselves. And so it is very important. And we're going to get there.
And of course, Governor, also, just before we conclude here, a number of programs or a number of rulings, were unveiled by the Supreme Court recently, and the judges that sit on the Supreme Court as it relates to affirmative action, LGBTQ issues. All of these issues kind of fit into the social category of issues that amongst many Americans can be seen as divisive issues. Under a Hutchinson administration, to what extent would you get involved in some of those issues, given, again, that they can be polarizing? Would you interfere? Would you provide policy proposals on these issues?
Well, on those issues, the main responsibility is for the federal government to get out. And the cultural issues should be determined by our local communities, by our families, by our faith-based institutions, and doesn't mean that government should get involved. They shouldn't tilt the scales. And so the federal government under my leadership would reverse Biden's policies of invoking themselves, trying to change our culture and trying to push businesses into that social governance requirements or green energy support. We would want to make sure that government was neutral. That's what you can expect from my administration, and get out of pushing that leftist agenda that we've seen from President Biden.
Okay, we will leave it there. 2024 Republican presidential candidate Governor Asa Hutchinson.